Grab your seats, we're going to get started here again. I mentioned as we were heading out to the intermission that the images in the entryway out there are from our great partners at CatchLight, our visual journalism partners. It's here for CatchLight. If you don't know CatchLight, you should. Check them out online, catchlight.io. They are an amazing nonprofit journalism organization focused on visual journalism, especially in California. And they put 10 fellows around California in local newsrooms, including in ours. You'll see our photographer, Larry Valenzuela, walking around shooting, to cover California in the way, frankly, that visual journalists used to do years ago when there were many more of them in newsrooms all over the state. And we've lost a lot of those positions. They are bringing it back. You cannot tell some of these stories without really telling the stories of people and showing them. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Yesica Prado. Yesi is a photojournalist with a rather unique story, and we're going to talk about that story and look at some of her images up here on the screen. Yesi, I want to start with a little bit of your background, right? So you grew up in Chicago?
Yeah, I grew up. Sorry.
It'll come on.
Hello, hello.
Just start.
Hello, hello. Not coming on yet.
Here, take this.
Okay, thank you. Hi. Yeah, so I grew up in Mexico, and then I immigrated to Chicago, and then I came to live in the Bay Area to go to UC Berkeley.
And so when you were at Berkeley, tell us about your housing.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so basically going to UC Berkeley was kind of like a lifelong dream, right? And then kind of when I got there, I basically had to make a really tough choice between housing and my education. I obviously made the choice to go for my education, and now I'm a journalist today. But in the meantime, I basically had to buy a recreational vehicle to live in the meantime that I could actually go to graduate school. And once I graduated, I mean, obviously you're not graduated into housing, so I still live in my vehicle.
Amazing. We're going to get your slides up here on the screen, I think, in just a minute. The photography that you've done, because you're living in a vehicle, like a lot of people are in the Bay Area, right, and around here, it gives you a different perspective, right? We're looking at some of the images now. Talk a little bit about some of these first images, especially, this is the Berkeley Marina, where you were living as a student, right?
Yeah, so I actually live here at the Berkeley Marina, and basically I ended up like staying together with other people living in their vehicles. Most of them were actually families with a lot of kids. There was like at least 9 children living in this parking lot. And we all just stayed together for safety, because otherwise, when you're out on your own, you're having to move every 3 days, and you don't know what are the things that are, you know, like, yeah, basically it's not safe to be on your own. But it was really great to be able to be in this space and actually create community and feel like we could actually belong somewhere.
And you're really a part of the community you're covering, which is fascinating. We always talk about being detached in journalism, right? Going in, gathering all the information, capturing the facts, understanding what's happening, but from an observer's point of view, how do you think about being in the community, living with people, going through some of the same things, some of the joy that's in your images of these communities, right? How do you think about that journalistic canon or ethic that you might have been told in journalism school and realized, well, that doesn't make any sense because I'm doing something totally different right now?
I mean, I basically wanted to, I wanted viewers to be able to see a different slice of like the world that we live in, right? And I think like for instance, a lot of journalists, yes, they do go out to cover these stories, but like you don't get to be there at night when other things are happening, when actually most people are busy at night doing their chores, trying to live. And I think just being able to like be close to the community, I just wanted to show like, you know, like, yes, there's a lot of hardships in our lives, and it is tough, but it's basically being in unity and being with each other, that we get the strength to keep going forward and to be able to live in the Bay Area, even though, you know, it's really hard for us to find a place to live in.
It's hard. Let's go from the power of that community to some of the heartbreaking stories you've covered about encampments. We have seen a number of encampments cleared, other words for it. You've been at covering some of these. We're going to look at some of your images from the clearing of these encampments and talk a little bit about what it's like when you're covering one of these things. Because again, this is maybe your community or a community like the one you're in, but it's tremendously personal, right?
Yeah, so basically, like, encampment clearance is something that is like a public policy that is in every city. Like, this is something that is done. And I think, like, what I wanted to show is basically the displacement that happens. Like, it's not just really cleaning that happens. It's like people being forced to give up their belongings. There's like a mental injury that happens when you're in this kind of stressful space. And I think, like, we need to show that, you know, people are trying to save anything that they have. And it's taken away, even if it's something just so minimal as their clothes. Like, it is basically city officials that determine what is valuable and what is not. And I think, basically people don't have much of a choice other than to keep moving along.
I told you before, I paused on this image as I was going through a lot of your work, right? The first part of it looks creepily like a police recruiting video, right? And then you see what's going on in the background. That's a forklift removing a vehicle in one of these encampment clearings. And for somebody who lives in a vehicle, how do you photograph something like this, I don't know, without falling apart? Like, how do you, what's it like when you're doing, it's so personal. Your journalism is so personal.
Yeah, actually, every time that I show up to an encampment clearing, it's really distressful, it's heartbreaking, and I feel so much anxiety for the people that are there, because, like, it's really tough. Like, you don't even, like, there is no choice, right? And you have to quickly make decisions of where you're gonna go next and what you're gonna do now. So for this instance, in this photograph, CHP was at the Wood Street encampment, which is in Oakland, and they were shut down last year. And basically, they were like marking the vehicles that were not registered as abandoned vehicles, even though that actually that vehicle belonged to someone. But just because it was not registered, it was gonna get towed. And here you have the activist in the background too, like he's trying to document that this is happening to this person. And I think that should be the role of a lot of journalists. Like, we should be that person that's actually documenting what is happening to people. And unfortunately, I just don't see many journalists be out there documenting these incidents. Yeah.
Wow. I want to talk about two of the people you photographed. Tell us first about this gentleman. We only have a couple minutes left, so give us a quick idea of him and then the other person, and we'll...
Yeah, so basically this is Gregory Nelson. He lives in the Potrero Hill neighborhood in San Francisco. He was often having to move along because he lived in a vehicle, right? So you see the parking signs. Like, for him, those signs are the places where he can be, and the time limits that you have in every space that you try to be in. So for him, it was really tough. He had also a disability. So for him to be moving every 3 days or every 4 hours, it was kind of nearly impossible. So he will basically have to try to move at night. And right now the city's kind of moving towards having more enforcement happening versus allocating the spaces where people can actually be.
So it's not getting any better.
Yeah. It's just basically enforcement is becoming more tight. And yeah, people are just wandering around. This is Tante Tolbert. She also lived in her vehicle in the Bayview neighborhood in San Francisco. But her story was a little bit different because, she would just go to work. She was able to stay in that one place because the Bayview is more, there's more parking in the Bayview. But basically, because she was also a single mother, she was also able to be part of this program where they were helping unhoused families. So she was able to get into housing after living in her vehicle for so long. And this is what it looks like to be prioritized, right? To be able to get into a service, a homeless services that actually helps you, get off your feet. And unfortunately, that was not the case for Greg. He was not able to get into housing, and he unfortunately passed away in his vehicle 3 years ago. But it is because, who do we prioritize? That's really the big question.
Yes, I can't tell you how meaningful it is for us that you do this work, right? You get out there and do this photojournalism. The stories are powerful and heartbreaking, and they should be, because it is a powerful, heartbreaking story. We're now going to move into some conversations about some of the solutions to this, but I thank you so much for coming and setting the stage for this and helping us understand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.